Thank you, Warehouse. I appreciate it. Like JD said, my name is Josh Farley. I'm one of the small group leaders here. I've got the privilege and the honor to be serving as the small group leader for the senior boys right now. And it's been a fun adventure being with them for the last several years. And I just enjoy every day that I get to be here at the Warehouse. And I really enjoy getting to share with all of you. So to get things started, as we're talking about this free people and what does freedom look like in Christ in this message series, I want to ask you all a quick question. Just shout out an answer if you've got something for me. What's the most dangerous thing that you've ever done? Somebody give me something. Something dangerous. Anybody? Anybody gone skydiving before? Yeah, we got. I see one. Yeah. All right. How about like swimming with the sharks? Maybe that's something I want to do. No, no swimmers with the sharks. All right. Well, there's a lot of dangerous things that we can do. How about? Do we have anybody that enjoys hiking out there? Any hikers? Okay. Do you ever think of hiking as being a dangerous thing? Not so much. You know, it's kind of going for a walk in the woods, maybe. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to show you a couple pictures of some hikes that might change your mind a little bit. First one here is Bright Angel Trail, and that's in the Grand Canyon. Now, that one to me doesn't look too bad. The upper left looks like kind of a nice trail, frankly. But the reality of it is there's about 4,000 vertical feet of elevation gain and loss in that trail. And it's in the desert, so it can be like 110 degrees plus when you're hiking it. And the real tough part about this one is you start at the top and you hike to the bottom. So you've only made it halfway, but you haven't used up a lot of energy, but you got a long ways to get back to the top. Upper right or the lower right one there is a little bit more intense. Via Ferrata in Italy and Austria. Those guys are just kind of hanging on the side of a cliff, and that's the trail for hiking. How about the next slide here? So El Caminito del Rey in Spain. That one looks super cool to me, where you're like hanging off the side of the cliff all the way around to that bridge. And then we got Mount Huashan in China, which looks kind of intense there. But let me read something about Mount Huashan. Imagine the most challenging hiking experience that you've ever had and multiply it by about 100. This will give you some idea of how dangerous and difficult it is to hike Mount Huashan. The routes are barely walkable, and you walk on thin floating boards attached only by nails and giant staples. And you have to hold on to cables at all times if you don't want to find yourself falling down off the cliff. The old rickety boards and steep rock faced trails have led many deadly accidents. But here's the good thing. They've got some recent safety improvements that make it a little bit better. So, maybe we'll go for it. What I love about this picture is you just heard that, and you got this guy wearing like his golf shirt and shorts and kind of sneaker things, and the lady, I think she looks like she's heading to the grocery store or something, and they're on this terrible, treacherous hike. So how about this next one? This is El Capitan. This is back in the United States. This is in Yosemite, and this is actually more of a rock climb than it is a trail, but it kind of expresses the idea of dangerous hiking, dangerous trails. And so I want you to take a quick look at a video clip from the documentary called Free Solo.
But the boulder problem has a 10-foot section that's incredibly difficult. It's a very intricate sequence. You've got your right hand on a crimp, left hand on a side pull, and then you put your right foot onto this dimple thing. Right hand goes up to a small down pull and crimp. And then you drive up off the left foot into the thumb press. That's the worst hold on the entire route. So you get maybe half your thumb on the hold. Then you roll your two fingers over the thumb. Switch your feet. Left foot stems out to this really bad sloping black foothold. Switch your thumbs. And then reach out left to a big sloping bread loaf type hold that feels kind of grainy. From there, either karate kick or double dyno to an edge on the opposite wall. In some ways, it makes more sense to do the big two-handed jump because you're jumping to a good edge, so there's actually something to catch. But the idea of jumping without a rope seems completely outrageous. If you miss it, that's that.
So crazy, right? So this is Alex Honnold, and he's what's known as a free soloer. And free soloing is going out and climbing stuff like this by yourself and with no ropes. So that's what he does. This was doing a practice run for what he was going to do, which is summit El Capitan with no ropes and nobody there to help him. Talk about crazy. He does that same move when he's doing it. So it's a great documentary if you're ever interested in seeing something totally wild. So obviously these hikes, these examples that I've shown you, they're probably pretty extreme compared to what any of us might do on a normal basis if we go hiking. You know, if we go for a little hike, we might, run out of water and get dehydrated, or we might get some bug bites or sunburn or something like that. Not real big risks. But there are a lot of places where you can go hiking that it can be a big risk. I'm going to show you another one here. It's the Maroon Bells. This is in Colorado. And this is what's known as a 14er. These two peaks are both above the elevation of 14,000 feet relative to sea level. And a big thing in Colorado is to go and summit 14ers. It can be very exciting and exhilarating, but it can also be very dangerous. My wife and I, Kelly and I, got to go there about 11 years ago, and we went for a hike in the wilderness area, and we had a great time. My wife was actually 6 months pregnant with our first child during this. You know, we got to walk through some nice grasslands, do a little bouldering, go along some streams, come to an alpine lake, and I'd say probably the biggest risk we faced was when we sat down on a log and this little snake was sitting there, kind of waiting to hang out with us. But then we saw on the other side of the lake, a sign that said, this way to the summit of Maroon Bells. Like, heck yeah, let's do it. It's only noon or so. We feel pretty good. Let's go for it. So here we went up to go for the summit, and you can see it gets pretty steep. Well, okay, so that's not actually my wife. That's a picture of somebody else actually doing the summit. We didn't make that decision, and here's why. Maroon Bells has a nickname. It's called the Deadly Bells. The reason it's called the Deadly Bells is that you have to deal with over 5,000 feet of elevation gain. The length of the trail is about 12 miles. It takes a good 7 hours to complete it. The summit is 14,156 feet above sea level. There's a lot of exposure to weather. The weather can start out being 70 and sunny when you get going, and as you get to the peak, it might be a whiteout blizzard condition. So people too often don't go prepared. They think, I'm just going to go for it. That looks cool. And they go for the summit, not knowing what they're about to get into. This ridge that goes to the peak is part of the trail. It's all eroded rock. If your foot slips a little bit, you're going down those sides. So they have several people every year die on this. Many have to get rescued from it with severe injuries because they didn't prepare. They didn't realize that there were boundaries and rules to going for that summit. But then there's also a lot of people that do it and they do it successfully, and it's a wonderful experience. So the ones that don't do it right, they get careless and they take unnecessary risks. They get too close to an edge and it winds up costing them dearly. So not many of us probably have had the chance to hike a 14er, and many won't ever. But there are things that we have in common with these hikers that we have in our life. So during this series where we're talking about freedom at the warehouse, we talk not only about freedom, but also about rules and kind of the conflict that exists between those two things, where we want to think we're completely free, but we have this set of rules we have to follow. It's a hard thing to navigate. We have to ask ourselves questions about these things all the time when we get too close to an edge or to a rule. And we have to ask them when we're talking about, how far is too far, or how much can I technically get away with before I do something, wrong, or how far can I go until I get in trouble for it, or maybe how much can I bend a rule before it technically breaks. Now, some rules are out there that, probably should be questioned. There's things out there that we maybe should push the limits a little bit on, but we don't want to make it a habit to try and cross every line. We have to ask ourselves, how far is too far? So I'm going to share with you guys a little bit of a story about my own life when I was testing the limits, when I was thinking about how far is too far. Maybe I wasn't thinking about how far is too far is a better way of saying it. I went through a period of life when I was going through some pretty bad stuff, and I just kind of got out of sorts in my mind. I wasn't thinking right. I wasn't making good decisions. And so I had one particularly night, and I went out to a bar with a bunch of guys, and we hung out and went way too long. So I kind of came up against a boundary there, and I pushed kind of through that boundary in what I did. Next one, I got to the end of the night, and they're saying, hey, you can't stay here. You got to go somewhere. So I headed out and my car keys in my pocket. I got in my car. I figured, it's only a few minutes. I can get home. Not a big deal. There's another little rule, another edge that I pushed, and I went right up to the edge and I went right across it. So I got into my car, and some reason I decided at that point that I was essentially a race car driver. I knew I could drive well. I was going to put my skills to the test. And so I went out and I got in my Honda Passport, or a Honda Pilot, which is basically a midsize SUV. And I got in it. I got onto this 2-lane town road, and I hit it, and I went over 100 miles an hour out into the country. I drove for several miles, and I made it out. And I turned back around and said, "All right, I'm going to do that again." I went again over 100 miles an hour, running a little 2-lane road, and this time I didn't get away with it. I caught the shoulder a little bit. I went zipping across both the lanes, and I went flying out over a ditch. When I hit the other side of the ditch, the front end of the car caught, and it started cartwheeling. And the police say I probably cartwheeled end over end 5 times before I finally came to rest. I've got some pictures to share of the vehicle after the wreck. So that's me standing in the background looking at the car that I had wrecked the night before. You can see my hands are actually bandaged up. The reason they were bandaged up is I was holding the wheel like this, doing good driving. And when the car came down, the windshield actually went right through my hands and over the steering wheel. So I had glass all through my hands. I actually picked glass out of my knuckles for 5 years after that. When I came to, I got knocked unconscious when I was going through the accident. When I woke up, I was hanging upside down from my seatbelt, which that was one limit. Thankfully, I didn't cross. I did wear my seatbelt. But I was hanging upside down, and all I could smell was gasoline. And so the first thought that went through my head is, I got to get out of this car. This thing's going to blow up. So I managed to get out of the seatbelt. I managed to crawl out of the window. And in this picture, you can see the steering wheel. That's the window I came out of. The headrest that's in the back window is my seat's headrest. So that crossbar came down right where my head is supposed to be. God created some kind of little bubble in there. I don't know how. I don't know why, other than He's a merciful and glorious God. He protected me through that accident. So I made it out of the car, and I stand here today alive and able to share with you guys. It's a horrifying experience to look back at, and it had real consequences. So I don't tell this story to say like, "Hey, look, I'm tough. I made it through an accident like that," or anything. It's hard for me to share it because it's an embarrassing thing for me. Really, it's pushing through limits that I never should have pushed through, but I did it. And there were rules in place, there were laws in place that would tell me I can't do those things. You're not allowed to drink and drive. You're not allowed to go 100 miles an hour by the law. But with freedom, we can still go do it. But we have to deal with the consequences that come along with breaking those rules. By crossing those edges, we have to deal with whatever it brings us. I also want to tell you this story because if you have ever pushed a boundary, it may not be as extreme as driving 100 miles and wrecking your car, but if you've crossed boundaries that maybe you think you shouldn't have, be aware that every adult in here has probably crossed some of those boundaries too. We have experiences that we can share with you. Just like Jeremy was saying, you can come to us and talk about these things because we've been there too and we understand what you're going through. So don't be afraid to talk to us about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about how far is too far, and maybe asking a little bit better question instead of how far is too far. And we'll get to that in a second. But first, we want to meet this guy that we talked about last week, and this is James. And James is the half brother of Jesus, so he's the son of Mary and Joseph. And he, lived side by side with Jesus, and he was actually an early leader of the Jerusalem church. So after Jesus died, rose from the dead, and ascended, the church was beginning to develop in Jerusalem. And James was there to really help the people understand what it was to be a Christian. He actually had a nickname. It was James the Just. And he earned that nickname for doing what was good, what was wise, and what was honoring to God, even when it was difficult or unpopular to do that. So he's a good guy to give us some advice so that we can learn a little bit. He wrote a letter to the church of Jerusalem. We call it the Book of James, to help them understand how to live within God's law for them. And so we're going to take a look at God's law here. And this is Jesus telling us what the most important commandments are in the book of Matthew. He says, "And he said to them, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets.'" So, in that, Jesus gives us a real simple formula for how to live life. This isn't talking about the huge books and books of rules that the Jewish people had set up. They had hundreds of them. This is just saying you got to love God and you got to love each other, and everything else will kind of fall into place. But I hope that you guys are aware. I know I'm aware of it. Is it's not always easy to understand what it means exactly how to love God and how to love other people. There's all kinds of weird circumstances that happen in our lives that make it very unclear how to do that. So James helps us out with this a little bit in the letter that he wrote to the church. And he says this: if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. But when you ask him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. Such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Their loyalty is divided between God and the world, and they are unstable in everything they do. So it sounds kind of simple. We've got this law: love God, love people. And James tells us that in order to navigate that, we need something that's called wisdom. He says to ask God and he'll give it to us. So we need to kind of dissect wisdom a little bit and understand it. So first question we're going to ask about wisdom is, what is it? Well, wisdom is the ability for us to discern between right and wrong, good and bad, evil and good. But I'm sure you're all aware there's a lot of in between when you talk about good and bad. It's not as simple as this or that. There can be all sorts of gray in between those ends of the spectrum. So wisdom is being able to discern a situation and understand maybe what's good and what's best, or what's better, or what's maybe risky and fun, and balancing those out and putting it into the right practice. So that's what wisdom is. So why do we need it? Well, we encounter these situations every single day of our life when we have to ask ourselves, what is the best thing to do in this situation? So wisdom helps us to see danger ahead. It helps us to avoid harmful situations before it's too late. It helps us to learn how to escape from an already messy situation. So it plays a very important role in our life, in our everyday decision making. Next question we ask is, how do we get wisdom? And James's solution is pretty simple in his letter to the church. He says, ask God, he'll give it to you. But how do we ask God? I mean, we can pray to God and say, hey, God, I need wisdom in this situation. But does he usually then like audibly speak to you with booming voice and give you a command of how to handle a situation? He doesn't usually do that for me, and I imagine not for you guys either. Uh, God will, however, use all sorts of different tools to help us gain wisdom. First one he'll use is people. You might find wisdom in a conversation that you have with your parents, or with a teacher, or a coach, or one of your small group leaders. We all have different things that we can rely on to help express wisdom to you. So look to other people who can speak to you. Be honest and open with them when you're thinking about things, and listen to their experiences. And that brings us to the second one, which is experience. Now, experience is something like I relate back to my car accident. I experienced that firsthand, and I came out of it with some wisdom of what not to do. But that's probably a bad way to gain wisdom, by going through the hard thing and coming out the other side understanding why you shouldn't have done it in the first place. So rely on other people's experiences as much as you can, instead of having your own experiences. But the great thing about God is, even when we do make those mistakes, when we do cross those lines, he will use those experiences to help us and to give us wisdom afterwards. Another option is through history. So we've got centuries and centuries of people who have been, living great lives, and there's people that we can look back historically and really respect. So I'd encourage you, go find a little biography of somebody that you like, somebody you'd like to learn more about, and see what made them tick. See what drove them, what motivated them, how they lived their lives to become the people that they did. And then, of course, we've got what's always available, and what's probably the most valuable of everything is Scripture. We've got this Bible that is just full of helpful ways for us to live our lives. Sometimes you got to do a little work to find things that are exactly hitting on the things you're looking for, but I assure you, God's word has it in there. We're going to take a look at another passage of scripture that James would have been very familiar with, and it's a book or from a book called Proverbs. And if you are familiar with Proverbs, you know it's kind of like a almost like a how-to manual or an advice manual where it says, do this, don't do that. This way is good, this way is bad. It really lays out a lot of information, very practical information on how to make wise choices and how to live a good life. So in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 12, it says this: sensible people will see trouble coming and avoid it, but an unthinking person will walk right into it and regret it later. So, according to Solomon, who's the author of Proverbs and who is considered to be a very wise man himself, a wise person can see danger approaching and do something about it before it's too late. A wise person is able to predict how a situation might go before it's gone there and do something to change where it's going. They might see a toxic relationship that they're engaged in and realize that it's going to hurt them and get away from it before it's too late. They can identify a bad influence before it has negatively impacted them. They can see how their actions might cause regret and might cause harm to themselves or someone else before they take them. Now, a foolish person, on the other hand, foolish person will flirt with danger. They'll go right up to it. They'll go right, either they won't see the warning signs or they may see them and say, doesn't matter, I'm going anyway. That's the foolish person. They're eventually going to hurt themselves and others. They end up with regret that they carry for many years, often for the rest of their lives. They damage relationships that they really do care about, and they lose opportunities for things that they really worked hard for. So when danger approaches, a wise person doesn't see how close they can get to the danger. They don't ask how far is too far. They don't get real close and then think about jumping out of the way. A wise person's going to avoid it by taking precautions, just like we talked about those hikes before. You can make a good hike, a hard hike, a dangerous hike, but you can do it well if you've prepared properly. If you just go for it, that's when it leads to destruction. If they have a wise person, if they do have to get close to a dangerous situation, because sometimes we do have to get into those, they're going to come up with ways to prepare a safety net or have somebody come alongside them to do it with them, some way to get through it as safely as possible. So a wise person doesn't ask the question, how close to danger can I get? They ask the better question, how far from danger can I stay? So we got to look at what it is to be a foolish person versus what it is to be a wise person. A foolish person will say, how close to danger can I get? While a wise person will say, how far from danger can I stay? And we got to remember that free people don't dance with danger. So what are we going to do with this information? What do we do with this danger? Do we pack it all in? Do we go and huddle up in our homes and try not to go out and get into any dangerous situations? Kind of go do the COVID quarantine life and just make it that way. And what about our relationships? Do we have friends that are outside of our little church bubble? Do we engage with anybody else at school? Should we avoid anybody that's not like us that we don't get along with? I don't think so. Personally, I think God has given us a place to live and people to live around to enjoy and experience life. He wants us to live an abundant and full life. And in order to do that, I think we need to be out in this world. We need to experience this incredible creation that he's given to us. We also need to experience relationship with people that aren't exactly the same as us. We want to have input from people that have had different experiences than we have. We want to be able to be light that speaks into those that don't know Jesus yet. We have a lot of work to do out in this world, so we can't stay hunkered up and avoid all the danger. So the other side of that would be, what do we do? Just say, the heck with it. We got to go. We got to get out into this world and throw caution to the wind? Of course not. That'd be the foolish person way of going. We have to balance these things out and weigh risks and figure out what the best things to do are. So just like the dangerous climbs, they have a safety mechanism in place. They might have the ropes. They might have, the right provisions to make a big hike or a big climb. We need to create boundaries similar for our own lives. So we're going to talk a little bit about boundaries here. Instead of dancing with the danger, wise people respect and they'll keep healthy boundaries. So boundaries are set up to help us keep in line. Like I said before, we have the freedom to do whatever we want, regardless of if there's rules or laws or not. We can still do it and break those things. We need to set boundaries within our own lives that help to keep us steered on the path that gives us the most abundant and free life. So we've got an age range in this room, where we've got sixth graders up through 12th graders, and of course we've got our adults. And this is going to look different for where you are in that range. So for sixth graders, for instance, many of your boundaries right now are being set for you. Your parents are telling you all the rules that you have to follow. Your teachers are putting the rules on you, coaches, whoever it may be. You have many rules that are placed upon you. And I want you to understand that the people that are giving you those rules, that are setting those boundaries, they care about you. And that's why they put them there. They don't want you to wind up at the edge and crossing the edge and falling into danger and bad situations. They want you to be safe and enjoy freedom. So the first thing we need to do is to respect the boundaries that others are setting for you. That may include the law, again, teachers, parents, anywhere they're coming from. Now, as you get older, as you mature, as you get ready to leave home, some of our seniors here who are about ready to fly the coop and head out into this big world, you really need to start evaluating your own life and understanding your own boundaries and establishing those to keep yourself out of harm. You need to ask yourself some questions, about where do you struggle? Where do you need more boundaries? Where do you need accountability so that you can stay safe? And sometimes the answers might involve stuff like, having a specific time of night when you shut your phone down, or limiting what type of, internet space you'll go to. Maybe it's waiting a little longer before you start dating because there's too many temptations that you're not prepared to handle. Maybe you need to get away from a certain friend that's leading you down a bad path. There's all kinds of things that we need to evaluate, and each person's evaluation is going to be very different than the next. And so ask you that you would reach out to people to help you with that when you need that, because you could get a trusted friend or an adult into your life that can help you be accountable with those boundaries. And the last thing is really probably the most important thing, and that is that we need to pray for wisdom. We need to pray about everything in our lives, of course. But when it comes to making decisions and setting boundaries, praying for wisdom, God will use those different mechanisms that we have available to speak wisdom into your life that will help you stay on the path that allows you to experience great freedom and abundant life without going right up to that edge and risking falling off. So remember that free people don't dance with danger. They find ways to take precautions, and they do what they need to do to live that full, abundant life that God has for us. Let's pray. Father God, I'm so grateful to you that you have this wonderful place, the warehouse, where we come together each week and where these students can get filled up with your word. Lord, I'd ask that these words would touch the hearts of these students and that they would understand that there is freedom in having boundaries. And I ask that you would impart your wisdom upon them so that they would be able to establish those boundaries and follow them well, so that they would live rich, full, and abundant lives. We pray it all in your mighty name. Amen.